Chinedu raised his hammer and smashed through the wall. Dust filled the air. He swung again. The panel split wide open. And then 2 eyes stared back at him. Not a rat, not a thief, a child. Her face was pale, filthy, her hair matted. She whispered, trembling, "Don't tell them. If Mama knows I'm alive, she will kill me." Ngozi screamed, "Who buried you in a wall?" Inside a freshly painted bungalow on Adebayo Street, the Okafor family was settling into their new home. Chinedu Okafor, a bank manager with a reputation for discipline, had bought the house as a gift for his wife, Ngozi, and their 2 children, Ifeoma and Chika. It was their dream home, spacious, with high ceilings and old wooden beams that gave it character. But from the very first week, something felt wrong. At night, Ngozi would wake up to faint scratching sounds like fingernails dragging against wood. Sometimes the sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the corridor when no one was there. "Chinedu, did you hear that?" she whispered one night, clutching her wrapper. Her husband sighed, half asleep. "It's just rats. Old houses always have rats." But Ngozi wasn't convinced, especially after the food began disappearing. Bowls of soup left in the fridge would be half empty by morning. Gary inside the kitchen container seemed to vanish overnight. At first, she blamed the children. But Ifeoma swore she hadn't touched it, and little Chika barely ate anything at all. Then came the whispers. Ifeoma, the older child, started refusing to sleep in her room. "Mummy!" she cried one night. "There's someone in the walls! I heard them calling my name!" Ngozi tried to laugh it off. "It's just a dream, Nene. This house is old. It makes noises." But Ifeoma shook her head violently, eyes wide with fear. "No, Mummy, it's not the house. There's a girl inside the wall. She said her name is Amara." Ngozi's blood ran cold. Still, Chinedu dismissed it. "These children watch too many Nollywood films. Tomorrow I will buy rat poison. That will end it." But that night, when Chinedu set up his phone in the sitting room to catch the rats, what he saw the next morning made his hands tremble so badly he almost dropped the phone. At exactly 2:43 a.m., the camera captured a shadow, small, human, slipping silently from the kitchen into the wall panel by the corridor. And in the brief second before it vanished, 2 eyes glowed in the darkness. Not the eyes of a rat, not the eyes of a thief, the eyes of a skeletal child. The next evening, Chinedu sat in the living room staring at the phone screen for the 100th time. His rational mind screamed that it was a trick of light, maybe even a thief's child sneaking in. But deep inside, he knew this was different. "Ngozi," he whispered, "come and see this." His wife leaned over his shoulder, eyes widening as the shadow moved across the screen. She clutched her wrapper tighter. Jesus, that's a child. In our house, inside the wall." Before Chinedu could answer, they both heard it. A faint thump, then another, like someone crawling between the walls of the corridor. Ngozi's heart slammed in her chest. "Chinedu, we can't sleep here tonight. This house is not ordinary." But Chinedu was stubborn. Calm down. This is not a ghost story. Someone is hiding here, and I will find out today." He grabbed a hammer from the toolbox. Ifeoma and Chika huddled together, wide-eyed, as their father approached the wall panel where the shadow had vanished. The scratching grew louder. Then, silence. Chinedu raised the hammer and struck the wall. Dust flew. He struck again, and the wooden panel cracked. One more hit, and the board gave way, leaving a jagged hole. Ngozi screamed. 2 eyes stared back at them from the darkness of the wall. Not glowing, not demonic, but wide, terrified eyes. The eyes of a young girl, her face smeared with dirt, her hair matted and tangled like rope. The girl shrank back as Chinedu pulled the panel wider. She looked barely 12, her frame thin as sticks, her wrapper torn and filthy. "Who are you?" Ngozi whispered, trembling. The girl opened her mouth, and her voice was no louder than a breath. "Don't tell them!" Then she disappeared deeper into the wall, vanishing into the maze of wood and plaster like a frightened animal. For a long moment, no one moved. The house was silent again, except for Ngozi's shaky breathing. "Mama, I told you!" Ifeoma's voice cracked. "I told you there's a girl in the walls." That night, nobody in the Okafor household slept. Chinedu sat in the sitting room with the hammer in his hand, the broken panel gaping open behind him. Ngozi held the children close on the sofa, whispering prayers under her breath. Every creak in the walls made them jump. By morning, Chinedu called a carpenter to open the wall properly. When the boards came down, what they found inside shook them to the bone. Old blankets, half-eaten bread, a rusted tin cup with water, and scribbles on the wooden planks, childish drawings scratched into the surface with nails. Faces, a sun, a stick-figure family, and one word, written over and over again, Amara. Ngozi gasped. "So she wasn't lying, that's her name." The carpenter, unnerved, refused to continue the work. "Oga, this house gets story-o. I no fit touch am again. Better carry your family go hotel." He packed his tools and left in a hurry. That evening, when the house grew quiet, Ngozi heard it again, a faint voice. "Mummy, please don't tell her I'm here." Ngozi froze, clutching her chest. The voice came from the wall right beside her chair. "Who?" Ngozi whispered. "Who mustn't I tell?" The silence stretched. Then the girl's small, trembling voice. "My mother! If she knows I'm alive, she will kill me!" Ngozi's blood ran cold. The next day, Chinedu went to speak with the neighbors. At first, they were reluctant, exchanging nervous glances. But when he pressed harder, one elderly woman finally spoke. That house belonged to the Nwosu family. They were very respected in the church. Madame Nwosu looked for a child for 10 years, but when the children finally came, they were disabled. The girl has a big head, and the boy has a long hand. One hand was longer than one. Meanwhile, Madame Nwosu was a leader in the women's fellowship. She always wore her white lace and jewel, always quoting scripture. People called her Mama Holy. "Then what happened?" Chinedu asked. She was ashamed of having disabled children, as it will taint her name. The old woman lowered her voice. "They left suddenly 3 years ago. They said they were moving to Port Harcourt. But we used to hear things. Screams at night. Children crying. We asked questions, but she always said it was prayer. Fasting and deliverance. Who dares question a woman of God?" Chinedu felt his stomach twist. "Children! How many?" The woman hesitated. 2. Twins, a boy and a girl. But one day, only the woman, her husband, and their boy were seen again. The girl disappeared. They said she died of sickness. We never saw the body. Chinedu's face darkened. He didn't believe it, not anymore. That night, when the house was silent, the girl came out again. Slowly, like a frightened animal, with big-headed skull, she crawled from the wall, her bare feet dusty, her hands trembling. Ngozi knelt carefully. "Your name is Amara, right?" The girl nodded. "Where is your brother?" Ngozi asked softly. Amara's lips trembled. She lifted one bony finger and pointed towards the crawl space at the back of the house. Then she whispered words that would haunt Ngozi forever. He stopped crying. His hands stopped growing, so Mama buried him there. For days, the Okafors lived in quiet fear. Ngozi sneaked food to Amara, slipping bread and water through the broken panel. The girl would snatch it quickly, her eyes darting like a hunted animal's. Sometimes she spoke. Other times she only cried softly, curling into herself. Chinedu insisted they should call the police, but Ngozi shook her head. "If we rush, we may lose her trust. She has lived in fear too long. If she runs, we may never find her again." But Amara's words about her twin brother gnawed at them all. Finally, one evening, Chinedu took a torchlight and crawled to the back of the house, to the small crawl space Amara had pointed to. The ground there was uneven, the soil disturbed, and half buried in the dirt, he saw something glinting. A child's shoe, tiny, covered in earth. His stomach lurched. He stumbled back, bile rising in his throat. "Ngozi," he whispered hoarsely. "We cannot wait. This is bigger than us. We need the authorities." The police arrived the next morning, led by Inspector Ibrahim, a stern man with sharp eyes. At first, he was skeptical. A girl in the walls? Olga, do you know how many false reports we get daily? Children disappearing, ritual stories. Most are family disputes. But when Amara herself stepped timidly from the wall, covered in dirt and shaking, his face hardened. "My God," he muttered, "how long has she been here?" As the officers searched, they uncovered evidence piece by piece. Torn clothes buried under soil, small bones scattered in the crawl space, a rusted chain nailed into a beam, just long enough to keep a child tethered but hidden. The sitting room of Madame Nwosu's mansion was spotless, marble floors gleaming, chandeliers sparkling, Bibles neatly stacked on the glass table. But the atmosphere was thick, suffocating. Inspector Ibrahim leaned forward, his voice flat but sharp. "Madame Nwosu, we found bones buried in your old house. A child's bones. We found chains, and we found her. Alive, living in your walls. Do you deny this?" For the first time, Mama Holy's famous smile cracked. She pressed her gold bangles together nervously, then clasped her hands in mock prayer. "This is Satan's work, enemies of the gospel. I am being persecuted." But Ibrahim slammed a file on the table, his voice rising. "Enough games, tell us why you did it." Her eyes hardened. She rose slowly, towering in her white lace and gel, her shadow stretching across the room. "You want the truth? Fine. I prayed for children for 15 years, 15 years of mockery. People called me barren, a dried tree. Even my husband looked elsewhere." Her voice broke, but then twisted with venom. Then finally, God answered. But it wasn't a blessing. It was a taboo. They were of no use because they were twins and disabled. The girl had a bigger head with empty skull. The boy has the other hand longer than the other. Ngozi gasped, holding Amara closer. "In my village," Mama Holy continued, her eyes burning, "twins are a curse, a sign of spirits. Then when they come disabled, they're threat and our worst thing that could ever happen to me. A shame. And I could not let the world know. How can I pray for other mothers who are seeking for the fruits of the womb to have beautiful children while mine are full of curses? I am Mama Holy, a leader, a woman of faith. What would they say if they knew my womb carried an abomination? Oh, can I walk on the street with pride and every day instead of smiling, I am feeling ashamed of those curses." She complained and nagged. She paced the room like a caged animal, her hands trembling. "So I made a vow. One child for the world, and the rest for the spirits. Chibuzo, my golden boy, I presented proudly. But these two?" She pointed a shaking hand at Amara. "They were my offering, my secret, my sacrifice." Her face contorted, spittle flying as she shouted. "The boy cried too much. He was weak. His hands grew longer than human. The spirits demanded silence, so I gave them silence. I buried him myself in the crawl space with prayer on my lips. And this one..." Her eyes locked on Amara, wild and unhinged, with big empty skull. This one was next. But she was quiet. She was useful. I kept her in case I needed another sacrifice. The room went still. Ngozi's tears fell freely. "You made a covenant with your own blood?" Mama Holy threw her head back and laughed bitterly. "Better to lose 2 children than lose everything I built. My name, my power, my ministry, and the shame of patrolling the church, streets, and anywhere I go with disabled curses. I could not let the world know the truth." At that moment, even her followers, gathered outside, peeking through the windows, recoiled in horror. The holy woman they adored was gone. In her place stood a murderer, a woman who had traded her children for pride and power. Inspector Ibrahim removed his cap slowly. His voice was heavy with disgust. "This is not holiness. This is wickedness, pure wickedness." He signaled to his men. The handcuffs clicked around her wrists as she screamed scripture at the top of her lungs. "No weapon formed against me shall prosper. I am chosen. You are fighting God's anointed." But her words fell flat. For the first time, the world saw her as she truly was. Not Mama Holy, not a servant of God, but a mother who sacrificed her own children to protect her pride. After Mama Holy's arrest and sentencing, Amara sat quietly under the mango tree outside the Okafor's home, sunlight touching her face for the first time in years. She looked at Ngozi and whispered, "When my brother was dying, he told me to stay quiet. He said, 'Amara, one day somebody will find you. Don't give up.' I think he saved me." Ngozi hugged her tightly, tears streaming. "And now, my child, the world will hear your voice." Amara looked up at the bright sky, a small smile breaking through her tears. "For him, I will live." After 5 years in prison, Mrs. Nwosu regretted her actions as she pleaded she gets forgiven. But Amara never did, because the trauma and torture still leaves with her until the rest of her life. At the end of it all, we learned something deep. Disabled children are God's given children. They never made themselves that way. Care for them and protect them. Pride, secrets, and blind faith can turn a home into a place of horror. Always choose compassion. Always choose truth. And we shall see what comes next in my next story. Like and subscribe.